What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Reformed Reader, the channel where we review different forms of media through the lens of a Christian who is under the authority of the scriptures. My name is Josh, and today we're going to be doing a review of Dune by Frank Herbert. Now, before we dive into the review, let's go over what is this book about. Set on the desert planet Arrakis, Dune is the story of the boy Paul Atreides, heir to a noble family, tasked with ruling an inhospitable world where the only thing of value is spice, a drug capable of extending life and enhancing consciousness. Coveted across the known universe, spice is a prize worth killing for. When House Atreides is betrayed, the destruction of Paul's family will set the boy on a journey toward a destiny greater than he could ever have imagined. And as he evolves into the mysterious man known as Muad'Dib, he will bring to fruition humankind's most ancient and unattainable dream. Alright guys, the way I normally structure these reviews is I go over the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good being the things that I enjoyed, the bad being the things I didn't like so much, like characters, prose, stylistic choices, and then the ugly, which is what could be some sin that is steeped into the work that might hold a Christian back from reading it. So let's dive right in and start with the good. What did I like about Dune? The setting. The setting, I think, of Dune is more important than even our main character. The setting is probably not only the most important aspect, but the most memorable aspect of this story. Now, this seems to be a pretty common trend with science fiction. A lot of the science fiction that I've read is less character based and a lot more story based, or a lot more science based, or even a lot more environment based. It's how characters are responding to the environment or circumstances around them, and less about the characters themselves, which is perfectly fine. But going into it, when you think of Dune, whether it be the book, the movies, whatever, the first thing you think of probably isn't Paul Atreides, but is instead the world of Arrakis and the sandworms and those types of things. So I really loved the setting. So since the setting is the most memorable part of this book, and I liked the setting, that bodes well for the rest of this review. I really enjoyed the setting. I loved the world. The world felt real. This is one of those science fiction books where when you're reading it, you get that escapism. You get that feeling of diving into Arrakis with the Atreides family and witnessing these things. Now, the movies did an excellent job of capturing the essence of this story. I don't think the book could have been adapted into films any better, really, than they already were. So if you like the movies and you haven't read the book, then you'll probably love this. With me saying that, I did really enjoy the setting. I enjoyed learning about the Atreides family quite a bit, and the Harkonnens or Harkonnens, however you want to pronounce them. I'm sure we'll start an argument in the comment section with this, but I did enjoy reading about the families, but I was less invested in the families and the characters as I was the overarching story. So the setting is just phenomenal, and I don't think there's many other science fiction books that have tried to mimic, I don't want to say copy, but mimic this story that has been able to do it on the same scale. So I really, really enjoyed that. So let's talk about the bad. Some of you may be thinking, wow, you didn't really go over much in the setting. Well, it's because while that may have seemed like I would give this book a glowing review, there's actually quite a bit in here that I didn't enjoy. One of the things that they didn't capture in the movie that I enjoyed about the book is the inner monologuing, watching our characters dissect not just what other characters are saying, but what they mean when they're saying it and how they're trying to manipulate other people. And we saw that expressed physically on screen, which I enjoyed, but at the same time, it became pretty droning at times. So, it was exhausting to read about sometimes, was these inner monologues that we had with our characters. Another thing I didn't like about this book is, while the setting is great, you never really stray from it. I mean, you start out somewhere else in the beginning, but you stay on Arrakis the entire time, and it looks like it looks like this behind me. It's sand. It's sand and more sand.
I don't like sand.
It could be kind of boring. Now, for me, I like it when a story mixes things up, throws characters into different settings or whatever. And you don't really get that here, which is fine. The book is called Dune. But another thing I didn't like is I don't like that I didn't connect to our characters. I love a good story, but if I don't care about your characters, it's hard for me to be invested in your story. It's just you telling me information at that point because I'm not personally invested in our characters. I don't have an attachment to our characters, so I don't really care what happens to them. And if I'm being frank with you,
Uncle Frank? Uncle Frank, you're such a joke.
I didn't care about Paul Atreides at all. I didn't care if he lived or died. I didn't really care what happened to him. I understood that he had to live to keep driving the story forward, but I just kind of didn't care. I much preferred his dad's story. I liked his character. He was admirable. He was an honorable man. And then we, start diving into Paul, and he kind of seemed whiny at times, seemed spoiled. And then kind of as the book progresses, I liked him less and less. And so I wasn't crazy about that. Another thing that I didn't like, and probably the main thing that I didn't like, not only about the book, but about the movies, particularly the part two of the movies, was the references to the Muslim faith. Now, you might think, well, this is diving into the ugly, but there isn't really a category for this, and I wanted to make sure that I talked about it. Things like Maudib, now the language is obviously being pulled from the Middle East. The culture is obviously influenced by the Middle East, but the whole concept of Paul Atreides being their Messiah, I had a difficult time with. I have a difficult time reading about characters that are to be raised up as God. In particular, when they are being referenced in a more realistic way. Now, you could say something similar with Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, that how by the end of the story, not the Disney story, but by the end of the story that you had people that were in such awe of him that they may have tried to even praise and worship him. While I can see that, it's different. It's more make believe, whereas this is steeped into a real false religion, and so it was hard for me not to see those parallels. And so when I already didn't really care about Paul, and then they start referencing Paul as the Messiah, it just made it harder for me to read. And in particular in the movies, I think they leaned so heavy into the Messiah complex in the movies that it actually sucked a lot of the enjoyment out of the movie for me. And if I'm being even more transparent, I actually won't watch it again. I watched my son and I went and watched it in theaters because we loved the first movie, and I was like, this is almost word for word out of the book, with a few exceptions, which should have been made." And then we watched the second movie, and it was just like, yeah, y'all are leaning real hard on this Messiah complex, and it made me uncomfortable. I'll just say that it may be fine for you, but it made me uncomfortable. So that's why I listed it under the bad, not the ugly. Now that leads me into the ugly, which is what could be some sin that's steeped in the work that might hold a Christian back from reading it. And so I break this down into 5 categories and I rate them out of 10, 10 being the most severe. And so let's start with violence and brutality. Violence and brutality has got a 7, could even be an 8 at its most brutal moments. It's pretty violent, it's pretty brutal. You know what? I would probably go ahead and push it up to an 8. Some of the fight scenes, some of the espionage, those kinds of things that are going on tend to be pretty violent, pretty brutal, pretty violent book. A lot goes on in this book. There's a lot of big battle scenes. This leads me into the second category, which is sexually explicit content. I give this a 1. There's not really anything in here. The only mention was talking about Paul's parents and the dynamic there that I can recall. There's nothing really sexually explicit about this book. It would be unnecessary if it was. The story is about the Atreides family and how they are overcoming these circumstances that the Harkonnens are have placed them in or thrown them into. So there shouldn't be any sexually explicit content in here anyway, because it would make zero sense for the plot. So that leads me into language. I gave this a 0. Now, I'm not saying there's no language in here, but I don't remember any. It's been a couple years since I've read it, but I don't remember any language in here whatsoever. I think there were some harsh, I would say there's like harsh language, but not swearing in particular. Maybe I should revise that too, because normally with language, I also include blasphemy. If I'm including blasphemy in this, then it's going to be pretty high. But I already talked about that previously, so I'm going to mention specific swearing, and there wasn't really anything in here. That leads me into category number 4, which is gratuitous inclusions. There's a 0. Big fat goose egg. There's no inclusion in here for the sake of inclusivity or diversity for the sake of being diverse. It's exactly what you get. Frank Herbert had a story in mind with a certain setting, with certain characters, and that's what he wrote, regardless of what he was maybe being compelled to write about from the outside world. He just wrote a story that he planned to write. And with that, there are no gratuitous inclusions in here from my own recollection. And then that leads us into number 5, which is dark themes. And I put this at a 2 because it depends on how you interpret it. In that regard, I would say there's the dark theme here is murder, espionage, mutiny, those kinds of things. Nothing really spiritually dark. Nothing that makes you squirm. That would prick your conscience in that sense. But like I said before, the parallels with the Muslim faith and this book, I would say maybe you could throw this a little bit in that category. And so, if you don't want to read about that, then maybe this isn't for you. But otherwise, I didn't really see anything glaring in here. And this leads me to the final question, which is, would I recommend this to a Christian? And if I'm being upfront with you guys, I would say, I don't know. Honestly, I didn't really like the book. I know there's going to be people flipping tables, and it very well could be the time that I read it, or where I was at in my headspace at the time of reading this, or the mood I was in. I don't know. It just didn't grab me. I kept hearing how this is the greatest sci-fi book of all time, and I don't really get it. I mean, it's pretty good. I could see where, I mean, it's pretty good in the grand scheme of objectively, but I don't get the hype around it really. And maybe that was part of it. Maybe this book was so hyped that I bought into it a little bit. And I don't know. It was fine. It was one of those where I'm like, I'm glad I read it. So that way it's one of the like essential fictional novels, especially science fiction. It's the science fiction novel that people read. I just kind of was on it. It was fine. So would I recommend it to a Christian? I don't know. Maybe. I don't think there's anything, let me clarify. I don't think there's anything wrong with a Christian reading it. I don't think there's anything wrong with a Christian enjoying it. It just wasn't for me. And I think in large part it's because of how hard it leaned on the Messiah aspect. And so that was just kind of glaring. It's hard for me to move past that. So, I mean, would I recommend it? Maybe to the right person. But I mean, if you're asking me, I don't know. I think there's better science fiction books out there. I will say the world is really cool. So overall, it was fine. I don't know that I'll revisit it. I might years down the road when I just, kind of get that itch to dive back into the world of Arrakis. I definitely won't be diving into the sequels with everything I've heard about them. Because I mean, this book you could read it as a standalone. Yeah, it was fine. Yeah, it was fine. I think there's better things for me to read, something I can get a little more invested in. But I had to pick up this copy because of how gorgeous it is. I mean, it's just the fact that his eyes popping like that is just so cool. So yeah, I had to pick up this version. But yeah, overall, I mean, I wouldn't say I disliked it, but I also wouldn't say I liked it. I was just it was fine. So guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do. It does help the channel out. But more than anything, please share these videos with your brothers and sisters, because I would like to be a good resource to my fellow Christians so that maybe we will spend our time, money, and energy more wisely and be better stewards with the time that God has given us moving forward. So, guys, thank you so much again for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I will see you on the next one.